The Arizona Territory didn't forgive mistakes. It was 1884, and the land stretched out like God had gotten tired halfway through creation. All red rock and thorn scrub, heat that could crack a man's skull by noon, and wind that whispered lies about water just over the next ridge. Towns out here weren't built. They were scraped together from desperation and stubbornness, held together by the kind of people who had nowhere else to go. Redemption Valley was no different. The name was a joke, probably started by some preacher with more hope than sense. There wasn't much redemption to be found among the scattered ranches and the single dirt road that ran through town like a scar. What there was, though, was Lydia Crow's land. 6,000 acres of scrub and stone, a ranch house that had seen better decades, and corrals that held more ghosts than livestock, and one horse that had become a legend. They called him Obsidian, black as a moonless night, standing 17 hands high, with eyes that held something between fury and heartbreak. Lydia had bought him off a broken-down trader 2 years back, thinking she could do what she'd done with a dozen other wild horses. Break him gentle, train him right, sell him for enough to keep the ranch running another season. That was before the first rider. Tom Mackenzie, cocky as hell and twice as stupid, had lasted maybe 8 seconds. The horse went vertical, twisted midair like something possessed, and Tom hit the ground so hard they heard his shoulder crack from the house. He left town that same night, couldn't even look anyone in the eye. After Tom came others, cowboys, drifters, a few professional bronc riders who'd heard the stories and wanted to prove something. One by one, Obsidian destroyed them, not with meanness exactly, but with something colder, like he was making a point none of them were smart enough to understand. 30 riders, 30 broken bodies and shattered egos. The horse had become more than an animal. He was a test, a challenge, a middle finger to anyone who thought they could master something wild just because they had a pair of spurs and too much pride. Lydia stopped trying to sell him after the first year. She couldn't, in good conscience, let anyone else get killed. But she couldn't bring herself to put him down either. So Obsidian stayed in the far corral, alone, untouchable, while the town whispered and wondered and placed bets on who'd be stupid enough to try next. She was thinking about all this on a Tuesday afternoon, standing on her porch with a cup of coffee gone cold in her hands, when she saw the dust trail on the road. Single rider, coming slow. Lydia's jaw tightened. She'd learned to read trouble from a distance, had to, living alone on 6,000 acres with nothing but a rifle and her wits to keep her safe. This rider wasn't hurrying, wasn't making a show, just coming steady, like he had all the time in the world and nowhere particular to be. She watched him get closer. He was riding a buckskin mare. Good bones, but tired-looking, like they'd covered some serious miles together. The man himself was lean, maybe 30, maybe older. Hard to tell with all the dust. Hat pulled low, canvas coat that had seen better years, and a way of sitting in the saddle that spoke of someone who'd spent more time on horseback than off. He pulled up at the gate, didn't dismount right away. Just sat there, looking at the ranch house, the corrals, the land stretching out behind it all. Lydia stepped off the porch, rifle in her left hand but pointed down. Not threatening, just present. "Help you with something?" The stranger tipped his hat back. His face was weathered, lined around the eyes and mouth in ways that had nothing to do with smiling. Dark hair going gray at the temples, a few days of stubble, and eyes that were an unsettling shade of pale gray, like creek water in winter. "Looking for work," he said. His voice was quiet, rough-edged but not unfriendly. "Heard you might need hands." "Heard wrong." Lydia's tone was flat. "Ranch doesn't turn much profit these days. Can't afford to hire. Didn't say I needed pain." That made her pause. Everyone needs pain. Most people do. He shifted in his saddle and she caught sight of rope burns on his hands, old ones, scarred over. "I need a place to sleep, food when there's extra, and work that means something. Got no use for money right now." Lydia studied him. She'd seen plenty of drifters come through over the years, most of them running from something, the law, a woman, themselves. This one had that same look of a man with a past he'd rather not discuss, but there was something else too. Something in the way he held himself, like he was carrying weight that didn't show. "What's your name?" "Ethan Hale." "That your real name or the one you're using?" A flicker of something crossed his face. Might have been humor, might have been pain. "Real enough." She should have sent him on his way. Should have trusted her instincts, which were screaming that complications were the last thing she needed. But the fence line needed mending, the barn roof was half rotted, and she'd been running this place alone for going on 3 years now, ever since... She cut that thought off before it could finish. Can you mend fence? Yes, ma'am. Fix a roof? Done it before. Handle livestock without getting kicked? Usually. Lydia almost smiled at that. Almost. There's a bunkhouse out back. Hasn't been used in a while, so it'll need cleaning. Water pump's working, but the stove's temperamental. You fix what needs fixing, you can stay as long as you're useful. Ethan nodded once, slow and deliberate. Appreciate it. Don't. Her voice went hard. I'm not doing you a favor. I'm using you for labor because I need the help. The second you become more trouble than you're worth, you're gone. Clear? Yes, ma'am. She turned to head back to the house, then stopped. And Ethan, ma'am? Whatever you're running from, keep it off my land. He didn't answer, which was probably answer enough. Ishipdank. The town of Redemption Valley consisted of one main street, a handful of buildings trying hard not to collapse, and a saloon that doubled as a general store, post office, and community center. The saloon was owned by a man named Dutch Peterson, 60 years old, 300 pounds of opinion, and whiskey-soaked wisdom. By the time Ethan had been on Lydia's ranch for 3 days, Dutch knew all about him. Well, all about what people were saying anyway, which in a town this size was as close to truth as anyone got. Quiet fella, Dutch told anyone who'd listen, which was most everyone who came through for supplies or gossip. Polite, don't say much, works hard from what I hear. Lydia's got him fixing that barn roof. What's he running from? This from Cole Braddock, sitting at the bar with a whiskey he'd been nursing for an hour. Cole was local, born and raised in the valley, worked cattle for the bigger spreads, and carried a chip on his shoulder the size of Texas. He was also the 17th man Obsidian had thrown, and he'd never quite recovered from the humiliation. Didn't ask, Dutch said, wiping down the bar. Didn't seem like my business. Man shows up out of nowhere, works for free, keeps to himself. That's everyone's business. Cole knocked back his whiskey. Probably running from the law. Or a woman, offered Martha Greenwood, the school teacher and possibly the only person in town who read actual books. Men usually run from one or the other. Or both, Dutch added helpfully. Cole's jaw worked. Someone should ask him. Someone could mind their own damn business, Martha said sweetly. He's on Lydia's land. That makes it valley business. Cole stood, tossed a coin on the bar. Woman's got no sense letting strangers sleep in her bunkhouse. No telling what kind of man he is. Dutch and Martha exchanged a look. They both knew what Cole really meant, that he'd been sniffing around Lydia's ranch for the better part of 2 years, ever since her husband died, and didn't appreciate competition. Not that Lydia had shown Cole any interest, or anyone else for that matter. She'd shut herself off after James Crow's death, built walls that made her property fence look like string, kept to herself, came to town only when absolutely necessary, and made it abundantly clear that she neither needed nor wanted anyone's help, company, or opinions, which naturally just made people more interested in her business. You planning to ride out there? Dutch asked Cole. Might. Check on things. Lydia won't appreciate it. Lydia doesn't appreciate much these days. Cole settled his hat. But someone's got to look out for her, whether she likes it or not. After he left, Martha shook her head. That boy's going to get himself hurt. Which boy? Dutch asked. Cole or the new one? Both, probably. She sighed. This valley's too small for this kind of drama. Valley's exactly the right size for this kind of drama, Dutch said. Nothing else to do out here but work, drink, and make each other miserable. He wasn't wrong. Ethan worked through the heat of the day, stopping only when the sun got too brutal or when his hands started bleeding through the bandages. The barn roof was worse than Lydia had let on, rotted through in 3 places, the support beams half-eaten by termites, shingles that crumbled when you looked at them too hard. He worked methodically, replacing what couldn't be saved, reinforcing what could. It was good work, honest work, the kind that let his mind go quiet for a few hours at a time. He'd needed quiet. Hadn't found much of it in the last year, not since Sarah died, since he'd lost the ranch in Missouri, since everything he'd built had come apart in his hands like wet paper. He'd been drifting since then, taking work where he could find it, sleeping rough more often than not, trying to outrun the memories that followed him like shadows. This place was as good as any to stop for a while. Better, maybe, because Lydia Crow didn't ask questions, didn't push, just gave him work and space and seemed content to let him exist at the edges of her life without demanding anything more. He was finishing up a section of roof when he heard it. Music. Not from the house. From somewhere past the corrals, out where the land started to slope toward the hills. Someone was playing guitar, simple chords, nothing fancy, but played with the kind of easy confidence that came from years of practice. Ethan climbed down from the barn, wiped sweat from his face, and followed the sound. He found Lydia sitting on a flat rock near the far corral, guitar across her lap, playing something slow in minor key. She didn't look up when he approached, just kept playing, her fingers moving across the strings with casual precision. The black stallion was in the corral. Obsidian. Ethan had seen the horse from a distance but hadn't gotten close. Now, watching him move, the way the muscles shifted under that midnight coat, the way he held his head high and proud like he owned the whole damn territory, Ethan understood why 30 men had tried and failed. This wasn't just a wild horse. This was something else entirely. "Didn't figure you for a musician," Ethan said quietly. Lydia's fingers stilled on the strings. "Didn't figure you for someone who'd sneak up on people." "Wasn't sneaking. Heard the music." She set the guitar aside, looked at him properly. In the late afternoon light, with her guard momentarily down, she looked younger than he'd thought. Maybe 35, with dark hair pulled back in a braid and eyes the color of whiskey. Pretty, if you looked past the hardness. "You play?" she asked. "Some, long time ago." "Why'd you stop?" The question landed harder than she probably meant it to. Ethan looked at the horse instead of answering. "That him? The one everyone talks about?" Lydia's expression shifted, closed off. "Obsidian? Yeah. How many riders now?" 30? You thinking of trying?" "No, ma'am." She raised an eyebrow. "Why not? Every other man who comes through here can't resist." "I don't need to prove anything to a horse." "Most men do, apparently." Ethan watched Obsidian pace the corral, restless, powerful, alone. "He's not mean," he said after a moment. "Just angry." "What makes you think that?" "I know angry." He glanced at her. "Known it in horses, known it in people. This one's carrying something that hurts." Lydia stood, picked up her guitar. "Everyone's carrying something that hurts out here. Doesn't make them special. Doesn't make them mean, either." She studied him for a long moment, and Ethan got the sense he was being evaluated for something beyond his ability to fix a roof. Then she shook her head, started walking back toward the house. "Finish the barn by end of week," she called over her shoulder. "After that, we'll see about the fence line." "Yes, ma'am." He watched her go, then turned back to the corral. Obsidian had stopped pacing, was standing at the far end, watching him with those dark, intelligent eyes. Ethan didn't move closer, didn't speak, just stood there, hands at his sides, letting the horse look at him. After maybe 5 minutes, Obsidian snorted, tossed his head, and went back to pacing. It wasn't much, but it was something. Batok. Cole Braddock rode onto Lydia's property that evening without invitation or announcement, which was typical Cole. All confidence and entitlement wrapped up in a 30-year-old body that had never learned the difference between persistence and harassment. He found Ethan at the water pump, washing the day's grime off his face and arms. "You the new hand?" Cole asked, staying mounted. "Power play. Make the other man look up, establish dominance." Ethan straightened, water dripping from his face. "Helping out. Got a name?" "Ethan Hale." "Where you from, Ethan Hale?" "Missouri, originally." Ethan's voice stayed level, polite even. "Couple other places since. What brings you out here?" "Work." Cole's jaw tightened at the short answers. "Lydia know anything about you? Where you've been? What you've done?" "She knows what she needs to know. See, that's where you and I disagree." Cole leaned forward in his saddle. "This is a small valley. We look out for each other. And when a stranger shows up out of nowhere, starts living on a woman's property, well, that concerns us." "Us," Ethan repeated. "That you and the town, or just you?" "Same thing." "Don't think it is." The air between them went tight. Cole's hand moved toward his belt, not to the gun there, but close enough to make the threat clear. You trying to be smart with me? No, sir. Ethan kept his hands visible, his stance relaxed. Just trying to do my work and not bother anybody. If I've bothered you somehow, I apologize. The apology threw Cole off, which was probably the point. He sat back in his saddle, trying to regain the momentum of the conversation. Lydia's a good woman, he said finally. Lost her husband a few years back. Been alone since. Town feels responsible for her. She strike you as someone who needs taking care of? Everyone needs someone looking out for them. Maybe, Ethan turned back to the pump, but maybe they get to choose who. That sounds like the kind of thing a man says when he's got plans. Ethan worked the pump handle, filled his canteen. I got no plans beyond fixing her barn roof and earning my keep. Anything else you're worried about exists only in your head. We'll see about that. Cole wheeled his horse around. I'll be keeping an eye on you, Hale. You step wrong, I'll know. Appreciate the warning. Cole rode off, kicking up dust, and Ethan watched him go with an expression that gave nothing away. From the porch of the main house, Lydia watched too. She'd heard the whole exchange, hard not to, with Cole's voice carrying like that. Part of her wanted to go down there, tell Cole to mind his own business, and stay off her land. But another part of her, the part that had learned caution the hard way, wondered if Cole might be right to ask questions. She didn't know Ethan Hale, didn't know where he came from, what he'd done, why he was really here, didn't know if the quiet competence was real or just a mask for something darker. But she watched him now, standing by the pump, drinking water and looking out at the land with an expression that seemed equal parts lost and found. And something in her chest shifted. Recognition, maybe. Or just loneliness recognizing its own. She turned away before he could catch her watching, went back inside and locked the door behind her like she did every night, keeping the world out, keeping herself in, maintaining the careful distance that had kept her alive this long. Potek. By the end of the week, Ethan had finished the barn roof and started on the fence line. The work was brutal, digging new post holes in ground baked hard as concrete, stretching wire, replacing rails that had rotted through. His hands were a mess of blisters and cuts, his back ached constantly, and he'd lost maybe 10 pounds he couldn't afford to lose. He'd never felt better. There was something clean about physical exhaustion, something honest. At night he'd fall into his bunk too tired to dream, and in the morning he'd wake to work that mattered, even if it was just to one woman on one ranch in the middle of nowhere. It was more purpose than he'd had in a year. He was working the north fence line, 3 miles from the main house, when he heard the horse. Not Obsidian, something smaller, moving fast. He looked up to see a paint mare coming hard across the scrubland, rider low in the saddle, and even from a distance he could tell something was wrong. The mare was limping. Ethan dropped his tools, moved into the open where the rider could see him. As they got closer, he recognized her. Martha Greenwood, the schoolteacher he'd seen once in town. Her face was pale, streaked with dust and tears. "Help!" she gasped, pulling up hard. "Please, I need help." "What happened?" "Tommy Harrison. He's one of my students. He was playing near the old mine shaft on the eastern ridge. He fell." Her voice cracked. "He's trapped down there. I can hear him crying, but I can't reach him. And I can't ride for help because my horse is hurt and—" "How deep?" "I don't know. 20 feet, maybe more. Please, you have to show me." He swung up behind her, and the mare, bless her heart, carried them both despite the limp. They made it to the ridge in 15 minutes, found the shaft easily enough. It was an old prospect hole from decades back, poorly covered with rotted boards that had given way under a child's weight. Ethan could hear crying from below. Young, terrified, hurt. "Tommy," Martha called down. "Hubba, Tommy, honey, can you hear me?" "It hurts." The boy's voice echoed up, small and scared. "My leg hurts." Ethan assessed the situation. The shaft was maybe 3 feet across, vertical, no telling how stable. He looked at Martha. "Ride back to the ranch. Tell Lydia to bring rope, medical supplies, and anyone else she can find, fast as you can." "What are you going to do?" "Go down and sit with him until you get back." "You can't. If the shaft collapses." "It won't," he hoped. "Go, now." Martha went, and Ethan turned to the shaft. He found an old timber that looked mostly solid. tested it with his weight, then lowered himself into the dark. The descent was hell, narrow walls pressing in on both sides, loose rock that could give way any second, darkness that swallowed everything except the sound of a child crying. His feet found the bottom after maybe 25 feet, and he had just enough room to crouch next to the boy. Tommy Harrison was maybe 8 years old, covered in dirt and blood, his right leg bent at an angle that made Ethan's stomach turn. "Hey there," Ethan said softly. "I'm Ethan. I'm going to stay with you until help comes, okay?" "It hurts." "I know, son. I know it does." He shrugged out of his coat, laid it over the boy. "But you're going to be fine. You're being real brave right now. I want my mama." "She'll be here soon. Everyone's coming. You just hang on for me." The boy was shaking, shock probably, or the beginning of it. Ethan talked to him, kept him awake, told him stories about nothing important, just kept the words coming because silence in the dark was worse than anything. They waited like that for 40 minutes. When Ethan heard voices at the top of the shaft, the relief was overwhelming. Lydia's face appeared in the circle of light. "Ethan? We're here. Boy's got a broken leg, maybe some ribs. We need to stabilize him before we move him. Dutch is here with his wagon. We've got rope and boards." They worked together, Ethan below, Lydia above, Dutch coordinating. They fashioned a makeshift stretcher, secured Tommy to it with strips of cloth and rope, and then began the slow, terrifying process of hauling him up. Ethan guided from below, keeping the stretcher steady, praying the shaft wouldn't collapse. It held. Barely, but it held. When Tommy was clear, Ethan climbed out after him. He emerged into late afternoon sun, covered in dust and blood, exhausted and shaking, and found half the town standing there, Martha crying with relief, Dutch organizing the transfer to his wagon, a woman who must be Tommy's mother clutching her son and sobbing, and Lydia, standing apart from the others, watching Ethan with an expression he couldn't quite read. "You could have died down there," she said quietly. "Could have." He wiped his face, left streaks of dirt and blood. "Didn't seem right to leave him alone, though." She held his gaze for a long moment, and something shifted between them, some wall coming down, some distance closing. Then Dutch called for them to move, and the moment broke. But as they rode back to the ranch together, Ethan on his borrowed horse and Lydia on hers, he thought maybe he'd found more than work on this ranch. Maybe he'd found a place to stop running, at least for a while. The rescue changed things. Not dramatically. This wasn't the kind of place where people threw parades or made speeches. But when Ethan rode into town 2 days later for supplies, Dutch didn't charge him for the coffee. Martha Greenwood stopped him on the street to thank him again. And even the men loitering outside the saloon nodded in his direction instead of staring him down like a threat. Tommy Harrison's mother had cried on his shoulder for a full 5 minutes, and that had been harder than going down the shaft in the first place. Ethan wasn't used to gratitude. Wasn't sure what to do with it, how to hold it without feeling like a fraud. He'd done what anyone would have done, what anyone should have done. The fact that it seemed remarkable said more about the world than it did about him. Cole Braddock, predictably, had a different take. "Heard you played hero," Cole said, finding Ethan at the general store counter. His tone made the word hero sound like an insult. "Heard wrong," Ethan said, not looking up from the list Lydia had given him. "Just helped out." "Funny how you just happened to be in the right place at the right time." Now Ethan did look up. "You suggesting I arranged for a child to fall down a mine shaft so I could rescue him? I'm suggesting you saw an opportunity and took it." "Opportunity for what?" "To make yourself look good. Get the town on your side." Cole leaned against the counter. "Smart move, I'll give you that. Now everyone thinks you're some kind of saint, and anyone who questions you looks like the villain." Ethan held his gaze for a long moment. Cole's eyes were bloodshot, angry, looking for a fight that Ethan had no interest in giving him. "Think whatever you want," Ethan said finally, turning back to his list. "Doesn't change what happened or why. We'll see how long this act lasts. It's not an act. Everything's an act out here, Hale. You just haven't figured out which part you're playing yet." Cole left, and Dutch, who'd been listening from behind the counter, shook his head. "Don't mind him," Dutch said. "He's been in a mood since Obsidian threw him. Some men can't handle being humbled." "Most can't," Ethan agreed. "How's the boy doing?" "Tommy. Doc says the leg will heal clean, no permanent damage. You got him out just in time." Dutch started packing Ethan's supplies into a crate. His mama wants to pay you something. I told her you wouldn't take it, but she's insisting. Tell her to put it toward the boy's medicine or whatever else he needs. Already told her you'd say that. Dutch grinned. You're making me look good at predicting things. Ethan almost smiled, happy to help. He carried the supplies out to Lydia's wagon, loaded them carefully, and was about to climb up when he heard music coming from behind the saloon. Guitar again, but this time accompanied by a harmonica and what sounded like a fiddle having an argument with itself. He followed the sound. In the alley behind the saloon, 3 men were playing, badly but with enthusiasm. One had the guitar, an old man with more beard than face. Another worked the harmonica, younger, maybe 20, with the eager look of someone trying hard to impress. The third was attempting the fiddle and failing spectacularly. They stopped when they saw Ethan. Sorry, the old man said. We're not bothering anyone, are we? Dutch lets us practice back here. No bother, Ethan said. Sounded like you could use another player, though. The harmonica player laughed. Could use a lot of things. Talent, mostly. You play? The old man asked, hopeful. Ethan hesitated. He hadn't touched an instrument in over a year, hadn't wanted to, hadn't been able to without hearing Sarah's voice singing along, without remembering everything he'd lost. But these men were looking at him with such open expectation, no judgment, no demands, just the simple invitation to make music together. Used to, Ethan said. Been a while. Guitar or fiddle? Guitar mostly. Some piano? The old man held out his instrument. Show us what you got. Ethan took the guitar, felt the familiar weight of it, the worn neck, the strings that needed tuning. His fingers found the frets automatically, muscle memory older than grief, and he played a few chords, nothing fancy, just something to get the feel back. The sound was rough, unpracticed, but it was there. The music was still there. Hot damn, the harmonica player said. You actually know what you're doing. Little bit. You want to play with us? We get together Thursday nights, nothing serious, just messing around. Ethan handed the guitar back. Maybe. I'll think about it. Standing invitation, the old man said. Name's Roy, by the way. This is Billy on the harmonica, and that's Frank destroying the fiddle. Ethan. We know, Roy grinned. You're famous now. The man who went down the mine shaft. Wasn't looking for fame. Never are you? The ones who deserve it. Roy settled the guitar back across his lap. Offer stands, Ethan. Music's better with more hands. Ethan nodded, went back to the wagon, and drove out of town with something that felt dangerously close to belonging settling in his chest. He tried not to think about how temporary it would be. Everything was temporary. That was the only reliable truth he'd learned. Back at the ranch, Lydia was working with one of her other horses, a young bay mare still green but showing promise. She had the mare on a long lead, working her in circles, building trust and responsiveness through patience rather than force. Ethan unloaded the supplies, brought them into the house, then stood at the corral fence watching Lydia work. She moved with the horse, reading its body language, adjusting her approach based on what the animal needed rather than what she wanted. It was impressive, watching someone who truly understood what they were doing. You going to stand there all day or are you going to help? Lydia called without looking at him. Wasn't sure if you wanted help. I always want help, just don't always ask for it. She brought the mare in closer, ran a hand down her neck. You know horses? Some. Grew up around them. Come here. He climbed into the corral. The mare's ears flicked toward him, nervous but not panicked. Easy, Lydia murmured, though whether to the horse or to Ethan wasn't clear. Let her smell you. Don't reach out. Just be still. Ethan stood quiet while the mare stretched her nose toward him, breathing him in, learning him. After a moment she relaxed, and Lydia handed him the lead. Walk her around. Keep the line loose. You're not controlling her. You're moving together. He did as instructed. The mare followed, watching him with big dark eyes, testing this new human to see if he could be trusted. Good, Lydia said. You've done this before. Had a ranch in Missouri. Nothing like yours, but we had horses, worked with them every day for 15 years. What happened to it? The question was casual, but Ethan felt it land like a fist. Lost it. How? The usual way. Debt, drought, bad luck. He kept walking, kept the mare steady. Wife died. After that, I couldn't keep it going. Lydia was quiet for a moment. I'm sorry. Long time ago now. Doesn't make it easier. No, he admitted. It doesn't. They worked in silence after that, comfortable in a way that surprised them both. Lydia showed him her methods, explained her philosophy, which was less about breaking an animal and more about building a partnership. Ethan listened, asked questions, offered suggestions based on his own experience. By the time the sun started dropping, they'd worked 3 horses and fallen into a rhythm that felt like it had been there all along, just waiting for them to find it. You're good at this, Lydia said as they put the horses away. Better than most I've seen. Learned from my father. He had a gift with animals. You inherit it? Some of it, maybe, not all. Ethan closed the stall door. He could gentle anything, even the meanest horses, the ones everyone else gave up on. He'd take them and turn them into something soft. Said it was all about listening to what they weren't saying. That's a rare skill. Lost it when I needed it most. The words came out harder than he meant. When Sarah got sick, when everything started falling apart, I couldn't hear anything anymore, just noise. Lydia leaned against the stall, studying him. Your wife? Yeah. How'd she die? Fever. Came on fast, took her in 3 days. He stared at nothing, seeing everything. Doctor said there was nothing to be done, but I kept thinking if I'd just noticed sooner, if I'd just done something different, you'd have saved her. Maybe. Or maybe you'd have died too, and it wouldn't have changed anything except there'd be 2 graves instead of 1. Her voice was hard, but not unkind. I know that thinking. Know how it eats you up from the inside. Doesn't bring them back, though. Ethan looked at her. Your husband? James? She said the name like it tasted bad. Died 3 years ago. Town thinks I'm grieving. They're half right. What's the other half? She was quiet for a long time, and Ethan thought maybe he'd pushed too far. Then she spoke, her voice low and careful, like she was picking her way through a minefield. James wasn't a good man, wasn't good to me, wasn't good to the land, wasn't good to much of anything except himself. She met his eyes. But he was my husband, and when he died, I was free for the first time in 10 years, so yeah, I grieve. Just not for what the town thinks. How'd he die? Fell off a horse drunk and broke his neck. A bitter smile. Ironic, considering he spent half his life trying to break every horse on this ranch with nothing but brute force and meanness. I'm sorry. Don't be. I'm not. She straightened. But I'm tired of this valley thinking I need protecting, or saving, or whatever story they've decided to tell themselves about the poor widow Crow. I can take care of myself. Never doubted it. Cole does. Whole town does. They see a woman alone and they assume weakness. Their mistake. She almost smiled at that. You're different than most men who come through here. Different how? You don't need to prove anything. Don't need to be the loudest, the strongest, the most impressive. You just are. She shook her head. It's unsettling. Sorry. Don't be. Unsettling isn't bad, just different. She started toward the house, then stopped. Ethan? Ma'am? Thank you. For going down that shaft, for saving that boy. Anyone would have... No, they wouldn't have. Most people would have waited for someone else, someone braver, someone more qualified. You just went. She held his gaze. That means something. Before he could respond, she went inside, leaving him standing in the gathering dusk with a feeling in his chest that was either heartburn or hope. He wasn't sure which would be worse. The next morning, Ethan woke before dawn with a plan forming in his mind. He'd been watching Obsidian from a distance for 2 weeks now, studying the horse's patterns, his moods, the way he moved through the corral like a prisoner pacing a cell. The stallion wasn't mean, wasn't vicious. He was lonely, angry and hurt, and so deeply alone that he'd turned that isolation into armor, keeping everyone out because letting anyone in had only ever ended in pain. Ethan knew that feeling intimately. He made coffee, drank it standing on the bunkhouse porch, while the sky turned from black to gray to pale gold. Then he walked out to Obsidian's corral, carrying nothing but a bucket and his harmonica. The stallion watched him approach, ears back, muscles tense. Ethan didn't go into the corral. Instead, he sat down on the ground outside the fence, far enough away to not be threatening, close enough to be present. He pulled out his harmonica and started to play. Nothing complicated, just an old tune his father used to play, slow and mournful, the kind of melody that sounded like loneliness recognizing itself. Obsidian snorted, tossed his head, paced to the far end of the corral. Ethan kept playing. He played for maybe 20 minutes, then stopped, stood up, and walked away without looking back. The next morning, he did the same thing, and the morning after that. By the fourth day, Obsidian had stopped pacing when Ethan showed up. By the seventh day, the horse had moved closer to the fence, still wary but curious. By the 10th day, Lydia came out to watch. She stood on the porch with her coffee, saying nothing, just observing as Ethan sat in the dirt playing music to a horse that had destroyed 30 men. When he finished and stood to leave, she called out to him. "What are you doing? Just sitting?" "You're doing more than sitting." He turned to face her. "I'm trying to let him know he's not alone. That's all." "Why?" "Because loneliness makes things mean." He said it simple, like it was obvious. "He's not mean. He's lonely. There's a difference." "You think you can fix him?" "No, ma'am. I think maybe he doesn't need fixing. Maybe he just needs someone to sit with him and not demand anything." Lydia came down from the porch, walked over to where he stood. 30 riders, Ethan. 30. Some of them were good men, experienced horsemen who knew what they were doing. He broke them all. They all tried to master him. I'm not trying to master him. Then what are you trying to do? Be his friend. Ethan looked at the stallion, who was watching them both with those dark, unreadable eyes. If he'll have me. And if he won't? Then I'll keep sitting here every morning until he decides, or until you tell me to stop. She studied him for a long moment. You're either very patient or very stupid. Been accused of both. Which one is it? Haven't decided yet. She surprised him by laughing, a real laugh, short and genuine, the first he'd heard from her. Changed her face completely, made her look younger, less guarded. I'll let you know when I figure it out, she said, and went back to the house. Ethan returned to his morning routine. Word got around town, of course. In a place like Redemption Valley, everything got around town. Dutch mentioned it to Martha, who mentioned it to the blacksmith, who mentioned it to Cole Braddock while shoeing his horse. Doing what? Cole asked. Just sitting there, playing music. Not even trying to ride him. Cole's jaw worked. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Maybe. The blacksmith shrugged. Or maybe it's smart. Every other approach has failed. Why not try something different? Because it's not about approach, it's about strength. That horse needs to be shown who's boss. Tried that 30 times, didn't work. Cole didn't have an answer for that, so he paid for the shoeing and rode out to Lydia's ranch without an invitation for the second time in a month. He found Ethan working the fence line on the eastern border, digging post holes in ground that fought back with every shovel strike. Heard you're playing music to Obsidian, Cole said by way of greeting. Ethan didn't stop working. Word travels fast. It's embarrassing. For who? For everyone. You're making a mockery of that horse, of what he represents. Now Ethan stopped, leaned on his shovel. What does he represent? Strength, power, the kind of wildness that can't be tamed. Maybe he doesn't want to be tamed. Maybe he just wants to be understood. Cole dismounted, walked closer. You think you understand him? You've been here 2 weeks. I've known that horse for 2 years. Known him how? By trying to break him? By treating him like a challenge to beat? Ethan's voice stayed calm, but there was steel underneath. That's not knowing. That's fighting. Sometimes fighting is what's needed. Is it? Ethan gestured to Cole's shoulder, the one Obsidian had helped break. How'd that work out for you? Cole's face went red. You son of a... I'm not trying to insult you, Ethan interrupted. I'm trying to say that maybe there's another way. Maybe strength isn't about domination. Maybe it's about patience. Patience is just another word for weakness. Is it? Because from where I'm standing, it takes a hell of a lot more strength to sit with something difficult than to fight it. Cole's hand moved to his gun. Ethan didn't move, didn't tense, just stood there with his shovel covered in dirt and sweat, looking tired and sad and completely unafraid. You really gonna shoot me over a difference of opinion about a horse? Ethan asked quietly. The question hung in the air between them. Cole's hand stayed on his gun for another few seconds, then dropped. This isn't over. Didn't think it was. Stay away from Lydia. That's her choice, not yours. I'm making it my choice. Then you're going to be disappointed. Ethan picked up his shovel again. Because I work for her, and I'm not going anywhere until she tells me to leave. Cole mounted his horse, every movement tight with barely controlled anger. You're making enemies, Hale. In a valley this small, that's dangerous. I'm trying to make friends with a horse. If that makes enemies, says more about them than me. Cole rode off, and Ethan went back to digging, but his hands were shaking now. He'd faced down angry men before. Had learned in Missouri how to read violence, how to see it coming, how to deflect or absorb it depending on what the situation required. But this was different. Cole wasn't just angry, he was obsessed, possessive, dangerous in the way of men who felt entitled to things they'd never earned. Ethan finished the fence line by sunset, went back to the bunkhouse, and found Lydia sitting on his porch with a rifle across her lap. "Heard you had a visitor," she said. "News travels. Billy saw Cole ride out here, said he looked angry." "He was." "He threatened you?" "Implied it." She nodded, like she'd expected this. "Cole's been like this since James died. Thinks because he helped out a few times, because he made some show of concern, that I owe him something." "Do you?" "I don't owe anyone anything, especially not men who confuse kindness with weakness." She stood. "But he's not going to let this go. He sees you as competition." "For what?" "For me. For this land. For whatever story he's told himself about his future." She met his eyes. "You should know what you're walking into." "I appreciate the warning. Is it going to change anything?" Ethan thought about it, about the smart play, which would be to move on, find another town, another ranch, another place to stop for a while. He'd done it before, could do it again. Easier to run than to stand and face whatever was coming. But he was tired of running, tired of letting fear make his decisions. "No," he said finally. "I'm staying, if you'll have me." Something shifted in Lydia's expression. Surprise, maybe, or relief. "Why?" "Because I like the work, like the land, like—" he hesitated. "Like having a reason to wake up in the morning that's bigger than just surviving another day." "That's it?" "That's enough." She studied him in the fading light, and he had the sense she was making some kind of decision, weighing risks against possibilities. "All right," she said finally, "but I want you armed. There's a revolver in the house, belonged to James. I'll bring it out tomorrow." "I don't want trouble." "I know, but trouble's coming whether you want it or not. Better to be ready." She left him with that, and Ethan sat on his porch watching the stars come out, wondering how many more mistakes he could afford to make before the world stopped giving him chances to learn from them. The next 3 weeks passed in a pattern that felt almost normal. Ethan worked the ranch, fence lines, barn repairs, helping Lydia with the horses she was training. Every morning he sat with Obsidian, playing his harmonica, saying nothing, demanding nothing. And slowly, impossibly, the stallion began to change. Not dramatically, not like in stories where the wild creature suddenly becomes tame, but in small ways, moving closer to the fence, watching Ethan with less suspicion and more curiosity, occasionally nickering when Ethan arrived in the morning like he'd been waiting. On Thursday nights, Ethan joined Roy and the others behind the saloon. They played badly and laughed about it, and sometimes Dutch would bring out beer and they'd play even worse, but with more enthusiasm. It was the kind of simple joy Ethan had forgotten existed, making music with strangers who were becoming friends. No pressure, no performance, just the act of creating something together. Lydia started joining him in the morning sometimes, sitting on the porch with her coffee while he played for Obsidian. They didn't talk much, but the silence between them was comfortable, easy. Sometimes she'd bring her guitar and play along, finding harmonies to his melodies, and the music they made together was better than either could create alone. The town noticed. Of course the town noticed. "They're getting close," Martha told Dutch one afternoon. "Who?" "Lydia and Ethan. The way they move around each other. The way they talk. There's something there." Dutch considered this. Could be good for her. Been alone too long. Could be dangerous. Cole's not going to like it. Cole doesn't get a vote. Try telling him that. But for those 3 weeks, it felt like maybe things could be different. Maybe the past could stay past. Maybe two broken people could find something like peace in the middle of nowhere. Then Tommy Harrison's mother invited Ethan to Sunday dinner. It was meant as a thank you, a home-cooked meal, a chance for Tommy to properly thank the man who'd saved his life. Nothing more complicated than simple gratitude. But when Cole heard about it, heard that half the town was going to be there, that Lydia had been invited too, he saw something else entirely. He saw Ethan being accepted, welcomed, made part of something. He saw his own position in the valley being eroded by a man who'd been there less than 2 months. He saw a threat that needed to be eliminated. The dinner was held at the Harrison farmhouse, a small but well-kept place on the southern edge of the valley. 20 people showed up, most of the town's families, everyone wanting to celebrate Tommy's recovery and thank the man who'd made it possible. Ethan felt overwhelmed by it all, the attention, the thanks, the way people kept clapping him on the back like he was a hero instead of just a man who'd done what needed doing. Lydia saved him, pulling him aside while Mrs. Harrison was serving pie. "You look like you're about to bolt," she said quietly. "Considering it." "They mean well. I know. That's what makes it hard." He watched the families gathered around the table, laughing and eating and being together. "I'm not used to this anymore, being part of things." "You could get used to it again." "Could, if I stay." "Are you thinking about leaving?" He met her eyes. "Are you asking me to stay?" The question hung between them, heavy with implications neither was quite ready to name. Before Lydia could answer, the door burst open. Cole Braddock stood in the doorway, drunk and angry, with 2 of his friends flanking him like deputies. "Well, isn't this cozy?" Cole slurred. "Whole valley celebrating the great Ethan Hale, the hero, the saint." "Cole," Dutch said carefully, standing from the table. "You're drunk. Go home." "I'm not going anywhere. I have just as much right to be here as him." He pointed at Ethan. "More right, actually. I was born here. I belong here. He's just some drifter who'll be gone in a month." "That's enough," Mrs. Harrison said, her voice sharp. "This is my home and you're not welcome here drunk and causing trouble." "Trouble? I'm not the one causing trouble." "He is." Cole took a step forward. "You all think he's so noble, so brave going down that mine shaft. But did any of you ask what he was doing out there in the first place? Ask where he comes from? What he's running from?" "Cole," Lydia said, standing, "stop this." "Why? Why should I stop? Someone needs to say it. Someone needs to ask the questions everyone's thinking but too polite to voice." He focused on Ethan. "What are you running from, Hale? What did you do back in Missouri that sent you out here with nothing but a horse and some hard luck story about a dead wife?" Ethan had stayed seated, but now he stood slowly. "You want to know what I'm running from? I'm running from becoming you." The room went silent. "What's that supposed to mean?" Cole's hand moved toward his gun. "It means I'm running from bitterness, from anger, from being the kind of man who can't handle his own failures, so he takes it out on everyone around him." Ethan's voice was calm, but there was an edge now. "You're mad because a horse threw you, mad because a woman doesn't want you, mad because the world doesn't work the way you think it should. And instead of looking at yourself, instead of maybe trying to be better, you're in here drunk and looking for a fight with a man who's never done anything to you except exist. You don't know anything about me. I know enough. I know you see strength as domination and kindness as weakness. I know you can't stand the idea that someone might do things differently than you and succeed. I know you're scared." "I'm not scared of anything." "Then why are you here? Why can't you let this go?" Ethan took a step forward. "You want to fight me? Fine. We can step outside right now, settle this however you want. But it's not going to change what's eating you inside. It's not going to make Lydia want you. It's not going to make that horse respect you. It's just going to prove that you were right about yourself all along, that force is all you have." Cole's face was red, veins standing out on his neck. His hand was on his gun now, fingers twitching. "Cole," Dutch said quietly, "don't do this. Think about what you're doing." For a long moment, it could have gone either way. Then Cole's friends grabbed his arms, pulled him back. "Let's go," one of them said. "This isn't worth it." "Get off me!" Cole struggled, but they held him. "This isn't over, Hale. You hear me? This isn't over." They dragged him out, and the room exhaled collectively. Mrs. Harrison looked like she might cry. Tommy was wide-eyed, scared. The other families were already gathering their things. The celebration ruined. "I'm sorry," Ethan said to the room. "I shouldn't have—" "Don't apologize," Lydia interrupted. "You didn't do anything wrong. I provoked him. He provoked himself. You just called him on it." She touched his arm. "Come on, let's go home." They rode back to the ranch in silence, the night air cool against their faces. Halfway there, Lydia spoke. "What you said back there, about running from becoming him. Yeah? Were you telling the truth?" Ethan was quiet for a while, the rhythm of the horse's hooves filling the space. "When Sarah died, I was angry. Angry at her for leaving, angry at myself for not saving her, angry at the world for being cruel. I could feel it eating me up, turning me into something I didn't recognize. So I left. Sold everything, started drifting, trying to outrun it." "Did you?" "No. You can't outrun yourself. But I learned to live with it. Learned that anger's just grief wearing a mask, and grief's just love with nowhere to go." He glanced at her. "Cole's angry because he's hurting, but he doesn't know that's what it is, so he just keeps making it worse. Can he be helped?" "I don't know. Some people don't want help. They want validation for their pain. Want the world to agree that they have the right to be angry, to lash out, to make everyone else hurt too." He shook his head. "That's a choice he has to make for himself." They reached the ranch, put the horses away. Lydia lingered at the corral fence, looking out at Obsidian's dark shape in the moonlight. "Ethan?" "Yeah?" "I'm glad you're here. Glad you stayed." She turned to face him. "And I'm asking you not to leave. Not yet. Not because of Cole or anyone else, just stay." He looked at her, this woman who'd built walls to survive, who carried her own grief and anger and somehow turned it into strength instead of poison. He saw the cost of it in the lines around her eyes, the set of her shoulders, the careful way she held herself like she might break if she relaxed for even a moment. "I'm staying," he said, "long as you'll have me." She nodded, and something passed between them that was too fragile to name but too real to ignore. Then she went inside, and Ethan walked to his bunkhouse thinking about how easy it would be to care about her, and how dangerous that would be for both of them. In town, Cole Braddock sat in his rented room above the saloon, drinking whiskey and cleaning his gun, and planning exactly how he was going to make Ethan Hale pay for every humiliation, every slight, every moment of pain he'd ever felt. Because some men, when faced with their own darkness, choose to become it. And Cole Braddock had been choosing that path for a long time now. The morning after the confrontation at the Harrison house, Ethan woke to find Lydia already at Obsidian's corral. She wasn't doing anything special, just standing at the fence with her coffee, watching the stallion move through the early light like a shadow given form. Ethan joined her without speaking, and they stood together in a silence that had become its own kind of language between them. "He's different," Lydia said finally, "since you started coming out here. Calmer. Maybe. Or maybe we're just seeing what was always there. You really think you can ride him?" The question surprised Ethan. "Haven't thought that far ahead." "Liar." She glanced at him. "I've seen you watching him, studying his movements, his patterns. You're planning something." He couldn't deny it. For the past week, something had been building in him. Not a need to conquer or prove anything, but a quiet certainty that the horse was ready. That trust had been built, slow and patient, and now it was strong enough to test. "Not yet," he said, "but soon. The whole valley is going to want to watch. I know. Cole will be there. I know that too." She turned to face him fully. "Ethan, this is dangerous. Not just the horse, though that's dangerous enough, but what it represents. If you succeed where 30 others failed, if you make it look easy, Cole won't forgive that. Neither will half the men in this territory. And if I don't try? Then you're safe. Then Obsidian stays wild, and you stay alive and nothing changes. Is that what you want? For nothing to change?" The question hung between them, loaded with meaning that extended far beyond a horse in a corral. Lydia looked away, out at the land stretching toward the hills. "I don't know what I want anymore," she admitted. "I thought I did. Thought I wanted to be left alone, to run this ranch by myself, to never need anyone again. But then you showed up and started fixing my barn and playing music to my horse, and making me remember what it feels like to not be alone all the time. Is that bad? It's terrifying. She met his eyes. Because people leave. They die, or they run, or they turn into something you don't recognize. And I can't do that again. Ethan understood. He'd been carrying the same fear since Sarah died, the same conviction that caring about anything meant setting yourself up for loss. I'm not James, he said quietly. I know you're not. You're nothing like him. Her voice cracked slightly. That's what scares me. Before he could respond, they heard hoofbeats. Multiple riders, coming fast from town. Ethan's hand moved instinctively toward the revolver Lydia had given him, James's old gun, worn but functional. But when the riders came into view, he relaxed slightly. It was Dutch, Roy, and Martha, all looking worried. We need to talk, Dutch said, dismounting. All of us. They gathered in Lydia's kitchen. Too many people in too small a space, everyone tense and uncomfortable. Dutch stood by the window, keeping watch on the road. Cole's organizing something, Martha said without preamble. I overheard him and his friends last night at the saloon. They're planning to come out here to force a confrontation. Over what? Lydia demanded. Over everything. You, the horse, Ethan being here. Cole's making it about territory and respect and all the things men get stupid about. Roy nodded. He's been drinking heavy since the dinner, telling everyone who listened that Ethan insulted him, humiliated him in front of the whole town, working himself up to something bad. How many men does he have? Ethan asked. 3 for sure, maybe more depending on who he can convince. Dutch turned from the window. Most folks in town think Cole's acting like a fool, but some of them remember you're an outsider. Some of them don't like the idea of you showing up all the established cowboys. By playing music to a horse? By doing it differently. By making them look like they were doing it wrong all these years. Martha leaned forward. You have to understand, Ethan. Out here, pride is sometimes all a man has. You threaten that intentionally or not, and people get dangerous. Lydia stood abruptly. This is my land, mine. And I say who's welcome on it and who isn't. Cole can bring an army and it won't change that. Lydia, Dutch said gently. We know, but legal right and practical reality aren't always the same thing. If Cole shows up with men and guns, then he'll be trespassing and I'll shoot him myself. And then what? You go to jail? Ethan goes to jail? The ranch falls apart? Roy shook his head. There's got to be another way. Ethan had been quiet, thinking. Now he spoke. What if I give them what they want? Everyone turned to look at him. What do you mean? Lydia asked. They want proof. Want to see if I can actually ride Obsidian or if I've just been wasting everyone's time. So I show them. He met Lydia's eyes. I ride him, in front of the whole valley. Make it official. That's insane, Martha said. That horse has broken 30 men. 30 men who tried to break him first. I'm not trying to break him. You'll get killed. Maybe. Or maybe it works. And Cole loses his excuse for violence. Can't exactly claim I'm all talk if I've already proven myself. Dutch rubbed his face. That's a hell of a gamble. Better than waiting for Cole to show up drunk and angry with a gun. Ethan looked around the room. When's the next big gathering in town? End of the month, Roy said. Harvest festival. Everyone comes, even the ranchers from the far spreads. That's 2 weeks. You think you can be ready in 2 weeks? Lydia's voice was sharp with concern. I think if I'm not ready by then, I never will be. They argued about it for another hour, but Ethan's mind was made up. Finally, reluctantly, the others agreed. Dutch would spread the word in town. A challenge, but a public one with rules and witnesses. Ethan Hale would attempt to ride Obsidian at the Harvest Festival. If he succeeded, the matter was settled. If he failed, well, at least there'd be a doctor present. After they left, Lydia rounded on him. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do. Why? Why risk your life for what? Pride? To prove something to men whose opinions don't matter? Because if I don't, Cole will find another excuse, another reason to come after me, after you. This way, at least it's controlled. Public. Safer for everyone. Except you. I'll be fine. You don't know that. Obsidian could kill you. He could, but I don't think he will. Ethan reached out, almost touched her arm, then dropped his hand. Trust me. Please. She stared at him, eyes bright with anger or fear or both. You're asking me to watch you potentially die. I'm asking you to believe I know what I'm doing. Do you? Honestly? No, but I know that horse, and I know he doesn't want to hurt anyone. He just wants to be left alone, to not be forced into something he doesn't choose. I can work with that. Lydia turned away, arms wrapped around herself. My husband used to make these grand declarations too, used to say he knew what he was doing, that I should trust him, and every time it ended with someone getting hurt. I'm not him. So you keep saying, but men are men, and they all think they're invincible right up until they're not. She walked out, letting the door slam behind her, and Ethan stood alone in her kitchen, feeling the weight of what he'd committed to settling in his bones. 2 weeks. 2 weeks to build enough trust with the traumatized animal to risk both their lives on it. 2 weeks before the whole valley gathered to watch him succeed or fail. He went out to the corral. Obsidian was waiting, like he always was now, standing at the fence, watching for Ethan's arrival. The stallion nickered softly, a sound of recognition, maybe even welcome. Ethan climbed over the fence. For the first time in 6 weeks, he entered Obsidian's space. The horse tensed but didn't retreat. Ethan stood just inside the corral, hands at his sides, making himself small and non-threatening. Hey there, he said softly. I need to ask something of you, something that's going to be hard. But I promise I won't hurt you, won't force you, won't make you do anything you don't want to do. Obsidian's ears flicked forward, listening. I need you to trust me, really trust me, enough to let me on your back, to move with me instead of against me. And I know that's asking a lot. I know men have tried to break you, to make you submit, but that's not what this is. He took a slow step forward. Obsidian held his ground. Another step. The stallion's nostrils flared, breathing Ethan in, remembering the scent from weeks of patient mornings. Ethan extended his hand, palm up, offering nothing but himself. Obsidian stretched his neck, touched his nose to Ethan's palm. The contact sent electricity through Ethan's arm. This wild creature, this symbol of untamable fury, was choosing connection, was saying yes to trust. Good boy, Ethan murmured. That's good. He spent the rest of the day in the corral, moving slowly around the horse, letting Obsidian get used to his presence in the space. No halter, no rope, no attempts to control. Just two beings learning to exist together. By sunset, he could touch Obsidian's neck, his shoulder, could run a hand down the powerful legs without the stallion flinching. It was a start. That night, Cole Braddock sat in the saloon with his 3 closest friends, Pete Donovan, Jack Reese, and a drifter named Santos, who'd do just about anything for whiskey money. They'd been drinking since noon, and the conversation had taken on the circular, aggressive quality of men looking for justification. Public challenge, Pete said, shaking his head. That's smart on his part. Makes it harder for us to do anything about it. Doesn't make it impossible, Cole said. His eyes were bloodshot, his words slurring slightly. Just means we have to be smarter, too. What are you thinking? Jack asked. Cole leaned forward, lowering his voice, even though the saloon was nearly empty. That horse is dangerous. Everyone knows it. If something were to happen during the ride, if Hale got thrown, got hurt, well, that's just what happens with wild animals, isn't it? You want to spook the horse? Santos looked interested. Make it buck him off. I want to make sure Ethan Hale doesn't succeed. How that happens, I don't particularly care. Could kill him, Pete pointed out. That horse throws him wrong. He could break his neck. Could. Cole knocked back his whiskey. Or he could just get humiliated, same as the rest of us. Either way, he's not the hero anymore. And Lydia? Jack asked carefully. Cole's jaw tightened. She'll see. She'll see he's not what she thinks he is, that he's just another man who overestimated himself and paid the price. They drank to that, these 4 men who'd found in Cole's bitterness a reflection of their own failures, their own disappointments. They convinced themselves they were protecting the valley, maintaining standards, preserving something important. They never once considered they might just be scared men trying to tear down someone who made them feel small. The 2 weeks passed in a blur of work and worry. Ethan spent every available moment with Obsidian, building on each day's progress. The horse let him approach now without hesitation, would follow him around the corral, would stand calm while Ethan leaned against him, putting weight on his back. But there was a difference between leaning and riding, between standing still and moving together, and Ethan knew the real test would come under pressure, with crowds and noise and the weight of expectation. Lydia watched from a distance, her expression unreadable. She'd stopped trying to talk him out of it, but she hadn't forgiven him for deciding to try. The easy companionship they'd developed had fractured under the weight of what was coming, replaced by a tension that made every conversation feel like stepping on ice. On the morning of the 10th day, Ethan woke before dawn and went to the corral to find Lydia already there, guitar in her hands. "Couldn't sleep," she said when he approached. "Me neither." She started playing, something slow and sad, a melody that sounded like goodbye. Ethan pulled out his harmonica, found the harmony, and they made music together while Obsidian moved through the pre-dawn darkness like a dream. When the song ended, Lydia set the guitar aside. "I need to tell you something," she said. "About James." "You don't have to—" "I do, because you're about to risk your life partly for me, and you deserve to know what you're protecting." Ethan waited. "James was cruel," she said flatly. "Not in obvious ways, not where anyone could see, but in private, when it was just us. He was cruel, with words, with silence, with his hands when the mood struck him. He made me believe I was nothing without him, that no one else would want me, that I was lucky he'd married me at all." Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. "I stayed because I didn't know how to leave. Because he owned this ranch, owned everything, and I had nowhere to go. Then he died, and I was free, and the guilt of being relieved about that has been eating me alive for 3 years." "You don't have anything to feel guilty about," Ethan said quietly. "Don't I? I prayed for him to die. Not out loud, not where anyone could hear, but in my head, in my heart. I wished him dead. And then he was. And part of me still wonders if that makes me as bad as him." "It doesn't." "How do you know?" "Because wanting to be free from cruelty doesn't make you cruel. It makes you human." He moved closer. "And because I see how you treat your horses, how you treat the people in this town, how you've treated me. You're not him. You're nothing like him." Lydia's eyes were wet, but she wouldn't let the tears fall. "When you ride that horse, when you put yourself in danger, I need you to understand that if something happens to you, I won't survive watching another person I care about get destroyed. I can't. I don't have it in me anymore." "Another person you care about?" Ethan repeated softly. She met his eyes. "Don't make me say it. Not now. Not when—" He kissed her. It wasn't planned, wasn't thought through, just an impulse he couldn't control. She froze for half a second, then kissed him back with the desperation of someone who'd been alone too long, who'd forgotten what it felt like to be wanted for something other than what you could provide. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Lydia pressed her forehead to his. "You're an idiot," she whispered. "I know. And if you die on that horse, I'll never forgive you." Fair enough. They stood like that as the sun came up, two damaged people finding something like hope in each other's brokenness, and for a moment the world felt manageable again. Then the moment passed, reality returned, and they separated with the awkwardness of people who'd just crossed a line they couldn't uncross. "I should go," Lydia said. "Make breakfast. Pretend this is a normal day." "Is it?" "No, but we can pretend." She left, and Ethan turned to find Obsidian watching him with those intelligent eyes, and he could have sworn the horse understood everything that had just happened. "What do you think?" Ethan asked him. "Am I making a mistake?" Obsidian tossed his head, snorted, and walked over to the water trough. Not an answer, but not nothing either. The last 4 days were a countdown to something that felt increasingly inevitable. The whole valley was talking about it now. The stranger who thought he could ride the unrideable horse. The challenge that had taken on symbolic weight far beyond what it actually was. Dutch reported that betting pools had formed in town. Most money was on Ethan getting thrown within 30 seconds. Some bets were on serious injury. A few optimistic souls had put money on him actually succeeding, but those were long odds. Cole and his friends were conspicuously quiet, which worried Martha more than if they'd been vocal. "They're planning something," she told Ethan when she rode out to check on him. "I can feel it." "Let them plan. Won't change what I'm doing." "You're stubborn as that horse." "Maybe that's why we get along." She studied him. You really think this will work? I think if it doesn't, at least I tried. At least I chose to trust something instead of just being afraid of it. That's either very brave or very stupid. Been accused of both. Martha smiled despite herself. Take care of yourself, Ethan, and take care of Lydia. She acts tough, but she's more fragile than she lets on. I know. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, you two are dancing around something neither of you wants to name, and that's a dangerous game to play when one of you might be dead in 4 days. 3 days now. That doesn't make it better. After she left, Ethan went to find Lydia. He found her in the barn, organizing tack with the intense focus of someone trying not to think. We should talk, he said. About what? About what happens after, assuming I don't die. She didn't look at him. What's there to talk about? About us. About what that kiss meant. It didn't mean anything. Liar. Now she did look at him, eyes flashing. Fine. It meant I'm lonely and you're here and we're both broken enough to think that might be enough. But it's not. You know it's not. Why not? Because you're going to leave. Eventually, you'll leave. They all do. I told you I'm staying. You told me that before you nearly got shot by Cole, before the whole valley started watching your every move, before this became about more than just fixing a barn and earning your keep. She set down the saddle she'd been holding. You're drifting, Ethan. That's what you do. And I can't afford to care about someone who's just passing through. What if I'm not just passing through? Then prove it. Stay after the ride. Stay through winter when work is scarce and the land is hard. Stay when it's not romantic or exciting, when it's just day after day of the same struggles. Her voice cracked. Stay when I'm difficult and closed off, and pushing you away because I don't know how to let anyone in. If you can do all that, then maybe we can talk about what that kiss meant. Ethan wanted to promise he would, wanted to make vows and declarations and all the things people said when they were caught up in feeling. But he'd learned the hard way that promises were fragile things, easily broken by circumstance and pain and the simple fact of being human. So instead he just said, okay, 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 I'll stay. As long as you'll have me, I'll stay. She searched his face for the lie, for the crack that would prove he was just another man making empty promises. She didn't find it. You're really serious about this, she said slowly. About you? Yes. About staying? Yes. About building something here that matters? Yes. He moved closer. I've spent a year running from my grief, from my past, from everything that hurt. And I'm tired, Lydia. I'm so damn tired of running. So if you're asking me to stay and prove I mean it, I will, gladly. For the first time since he'd known her, Lydia's armor cracked completely. Tears spilled over, and she didn't try to hide them. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. How to trust someone again, how to believe in anything good. Neither do I, but maybe we can figure it out together. She let him hold her while she cried. For James, for the years of loneliness, for the fear of hoping again. And Ethan held her thinking about Sarah, about loss, about the courage it took to open yourself up to pain again. Eventually she pulled back, wiping her eyes. This doesn't change anything about the ride, she said. You're still an idiot for doing it. I know. And if you die, I really will never forgive you. Noted. She almost smiled. 3 more days. 3 more days, he agreed. They spent those days in a strange limbo, working the ranch, preparing for the festival, existing in the space between what was and what might be. Ethan continued working with obsidian, building trust in increments so small they were almost invisible, but that added up to something real. On the final day before the festival, he put a blanket on the horse's back. Obsidian tolerated it, though his muscles twitched with tension. Ethan left it there for an hour, letting the stallion get used to the weight, the pressure, the feeling of being prepared for riding. When he removed it, Obsidian seemed almost disappointed. Tomorrow, Ethan told him. Tomorrow we'll find out if all this trust means anything. That night, he couldn't sleep. He lay in his bunk staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that could go wrong. The horse could panic, could buck, could kill him in front of the entire valley. Cole could interfere, could sabotage, could turn the whole thing into violence. Or it could work. He could ride obsidian, could prove that patience and trust were stronger than force and fear, could show these broken men in this broken valley that there was another way. Around midnight, he heard footsteps outside. Lydia appeared in his doorway, wrapped in a shawl, looking uncertain. "Can't sleep either?" he asked. "No." She came inside, sat on the edge of his bunk. "I keep thinking about tomorrow, about all the ways it could go wrong." "Me too." "Ethan, if something happens, if you get hurt, I won't." "You can't promise that." "No. But I can promise I'll be as careful as I can, that I won't take stupid risks, that I want to survive this just as much as you want me to." She took his hand. "Why are you doing this? Really? And don't tell me it's about Cole or proving something to the valley. Tell me the truth." He was quiet for a long moment, searching for words that would make sense. "Because I need to know if I can still trust myself," he said finally. "I need to know if the man who could gentle horses and build a life and love someone without destroying it, if he's still in here somewhere. Or if losing Sarah killed that part of me too." "And you think riding obsidian will tell you that?" "I think if I can earn the trust of the most damaged, defensive creature in this valley, then maybe I'm not as broken as I think I am. Maybe I can still build something. Maybe I can still be someone worth staying for." Lydia leaned her head against his shoulder. "You're already worth staying for, you idiot." "Am I?" "Yes. Even if tomorrow goes wrong, even if everything falls apart, you're worth it. You need to know that." They sat like that until the first light started creeping through the window, two people holding on to each other against the coming day, trying to believe that trust and hope were enough to survive what was coming. And in the corral outside, Obsidian stood watching the bunkhouse, as if he too understood that tomorrow everything would change, one way or another. Dawn came too fast and too slow at the same time. Ethan woke to find Lydia gone from the bunkhouse, though the warmth of where she'd been sitting remained. He dressed slowly, hands steady despite the anxiety coiling in his gut. This was it. Everything he'd been building toward for the past 2 months came down to the next few hours. Outside, the ranch was already stirring. Lydia had coffee going, and the smell of it mixed with dust and hay and the particular scent of a day that would change everything. She looked up when he came in, and something passed between them, not words, but an understanding that went deeper. "You eat," she said, pushing a plate toward him. "Don't care if you're nervous. You need your strength." "Yes, ma'am." They ate in silence, both aware of the clock ticking toward the inevitable. Around 8, they heard wagons on the road. The valley was coming to them, it seemed, rather than waiting for them to come to town. By 9, Lydia's ranch looked like a county fair had sprung up overnight. Families arrived with baskets and blankets, setting up along the fence lines for the best view. Dutch brought his wagon loaded with supplies, claiming he was just being helpful, but really wanting to be close to the action. Martha came with Tommy Harrison and his mother, the boy's leg still splinted but healing well. The festival itself was supposed to be in town, but word had spread that the real event would be here. Ethan Hale attempting to ride obsidian. So the people came, drawn by curiosity and the promise of spectacle, the kind of story they'd tell for years regardless of how it ended. By 10, there were maybe 60 people gathered. By 11, closer to 100, and Cole Braddock was among them. He arrived with his 3 friends, all of them sober this time, which was somehow more concerning than if they'd been drunk. Cole's eyes found Ethan immediately, and the look in them was cold calculation rather than hot rage. "He's planning something," Lydia murmured to Ethan. "I can feel it." "I know. Just stay close to Dutch and Martha. Whatever happens, don't get between me and him." "Ethan, please, I need to know you're safe." She wanted to argue, but she could see the fear beneath his calm exterior, the real worry that this would spiral into violence, and she'd be caught in it. So she nodded and moved toward where Martha stood with the Harrison family. Dutch found Ethan near the corral. "This is a hell of a crowd," Dutch said. "Half the territory must be here." "Great, no pressure." "You don't have to do this, you know. Could just call it off, tell everyone you changed your mind." "And then what? Cole wins by default? The valley decides I was all talk?" Ethan shook his head. "No, this needs to happen." "Even if it kills you?" "Especially then. At least I'll have tried." Dutch gripped his shoulder. "You're either the bravest man I've ever met or the dumbest. Haven't decided which. Let me know when you figure it out." Roy and the others from the Thursday night music sessions had set up with their instruments, providing entertainment while people waited. The music helped, gave the gathering a festive air rather than the feeling of spectators waiting for a gladiator to die. Around noon, the crowd started getting restless. People had come to see something, and the waiting was wearing thin. Ethan knew it was time. He walked to the corral where Obsidian stood watching the crowd with nervous energy. The stallion wasn't used to this many people, this much noise. His ears were pinned back, his muscles tense under that black coat. "I know," Ethan said quietly, approaching slowly. "I know this isn't what you wanted. Too many people, too much attention. But I need you to trust me one more time, just once. Can you do that?" Obsidian's ears flicked forward at the sound of his voice. Ethan climbed into the corral, and the crowd went quiet. This was what they'd come to see, the moment of truth, the test of whether 2 months of patience meant anything at all. He had no saddle, no bridle, nothing but a rope halter he'd made himself and the trust they'd built. He approached Obsidian with the halter held loosely in his hands, and the stallion didn't retreat. "Good boy," Ethan murmured. "That's good." He slipped the halter on, and Obsidian accepted it, though his whole body was vibrating with tension. The crowd, the noise, the expectations. It was all too much, too overwhelming. Ethan spent 10 minutes just standing with him, one hand on his neck, speaking in low tones that only the horse could hear. Gradually, incrementally, Obsidian began to calm. Then Ethan did something that made the crowd gasp. He turned his back on the horse, just stood there, vulnerable, showing Obsidian that he trusted him completely. That there was no threat here, no fight, just two beings who'd learned to coexist. Obsidian lowered his head, pressed his nose against Ethan's back. The gesture was unmistakable: recognition, acceptance, trust. Ethan turned, ran his hand down the stallion's face, and then in one smooth motion swung himself onto Obsidian's back. For 3 heartbeats, nothing happened. Ethan sat there, weight settled, hands gentle on the rope, body relaxed despite every instinct screaming at him to tense up, to prepare for the inevitable buck and throw. Obsidian stood perfectly still. The crowd held its breath. Then Ethan applied the slightest pressure with his legs, and Obsidian moved forward. Not a buck, not a rear, just a simple walk, smooth and controlled, like they'd been doing this for years instead of seconds. The crowd erupted. People cheered, shouted, couldn't believe what they were seeing. The horse that had broken 30 riders was walking calmly around the corral with a man on his back. No force involved, no struggle, just partnership. Ethan kept his focus on Obsidian, reading his body, staying present to any sign of panic or fear. But the stallion seemed almost relieved, like he'd been waiting for someone to finally understand what he needed. They made 2 full circuits of the corral. On the third, Ethan asked for a trot. Obsidian gave it to him. The movement was powerful, fluid, perfect. This was what the horse had been meant for, not to be broken, but to be partnered with, to work together rather than in opposition. Ethan brought him back to a walk, then asked him to stop. Obsidian halted immediately, perfectly responsive. The crowd was going wild now, people standing, clapping, shouting Ethan's name. He dismounted slowly, ran his hands over Obsidian's neck, whispered his thanks. The stallion nickered softly, and Ethan could have sworn he saw something like satisfaction in those dark eyes. He'd done it. They'd done it. Ethan turned to face the crowd, feeling the weight of their approval, their amazement, their... The gunshot split the air like lightning. Everything happened too fast and too slow at once. Ethan felt the impact before he heard the sound, a punch to his left shoulder that spun him sideways and dropped him to his knees. Pain exploded through his body, white-hot and overwhelming. The crowd screamed, scattered, people diving for cover or running or freezing in confusion. Ethan looked down to see blood spreading across his shirt, dark and wet. He'd been shot. His mind struggled to process it even as his body started shutting down from shock. He looked up, trying to find the shooter, and saw Cole Braddock maybe 30 yards away with a rifle, his face twisted into something between rage and satisfaction. "Not so impressive now, are you?" Cole shouted. "Not so special." Ethan tried to respond, but his words came out slurred. The world was tilting, sound muffled like he was underwater. Then Obsidian was there. The stallion, who should have bolted at the gunshot, who should have panicked and run like any wild horse would, he stepped between Ethan and Cole, placing his body as a shield. Another shot rang out. The bullet hit dirt 3 feet from Obsidian's hooves. The stallion didn't move. He stood there, solid as stone, protecting the man who'd chosen to trust him instead of break him. His ears were flat against his head, his eyes fixed on Cole with an intensity that was almost human in its anger. "Move!" Cole shouted, working the rifle bolt. "Move, you damn animal!" But Obsidian didn't move. Dutch was running toward Cole now, along with several other men from town. Roy was shouting for the doctor. Martha had her arms around Tommy Harrison, shielding him from seeing the violence. And Lydia. Lydia was at Ethan's side, her hands pressing against his shoulder, trying to stop the bleeding. "Stay with me," she was saying, her voice shaking. "Ethan, stay with me. You don't get to die. You promised you'd stay, so you stay. You hear me?" He tried to focus on her face, but everything was getting hazy. "Lydia, don't talk. Save your strength. The doctor's coming. You're going to be fine. You just need to—" Another gunshot, but this one went wide. Dutch had reached Cole, was wrestling the rifle away from him. Other men joined in, pulling Cole back, disarming him. "He cheated!" Cole was screaming. "He did something to that horse, tricked everyone. This isn't real." "You shot an unarmed man," Dutch said, his voice deadly calm. "In front of 100 witnesses, including children." The reality of what he'd done seemed to hit Cole all at once. The rage drained from his face, replaced by something like panic. I wasn't trying to kill him, just wanted to scare him, make the horse throw him. You shot him, Cole. You tried to kill him. No, But whatever excuse he was forming died as he saw Obsidian still standing guard over Ethan, saw the blood spreading in the dirt, saw the entire valley staring at him with a mixture of horror and disgust. He'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The doctor arrived, an older man named Patterson who'd seen plenty of gunshot wounds in his time. He knelt beside Ethan, examined the wound while Lydia held pressure. "Went through clean," Patterson said. "Missed the bone, missed the major vessels. He's lucky." "Doesn't feel lucky," Ethan managed, his voice weak. "You're alive. That's lucky enough." Patterson looked up at the men holding Cole. "Someone ride for the marshal. This is beyond my jurisdiction." They took Cole away, still protesting, still trying to explain how this wasn't what it looked like, how Ethan had pushed him to this, how none of this was his fault. No one was listening. The doctor worked on Ethan right there in the dirt, cleaning the wound, packing it with cloth, wrapping it tight. The pain was excruciating, but Ethan focused on Lydia's face, on her hands gripping his good arm, on the tears streaming down her cheeks that she didn't bother to hide. "You're an idiot," she said, "a complete and total idiot." "I know. I told you this was dangerous, told you something like this would happen. You did. And you did it anyway. Had to. Why? What was worth this?" She gestured at the blood, the chaos, the destruction of what should have been a triumph. Ethan looked past her to where Obsidian still stood, still refusing to move, still protecting him even though the danger had passed. "That," he said, "that was worth it." She followed his gaze, saw the horse standing guard, and something in her expression shifted. Understanding, maybe, or acceptance that some things mattered more than safety. "Can you move him?" Patterson asked. "I need to get him somewhere clean to finish this properly." "The house," Lydia said immediately. "Bring him to the house." 4 men carried Ethan carefully across the yard while Lydia ran ahead to prepare. Obsidian followed the whole way, walking beside the makeshift stretcher like a sentinel, not letting Ethan out of his sight. They got him inside, laid him on Lydia's bed. Patterson went to work properly now, with light and clean water and actual medical supplies. The pain was enormous, but Ethan bit down on a leather strap and endured it. Outside, the crowd was dispersing, the festival atmosphere completely destroyed. Families packed up quietly, subdued by what they'd witnessed. The story they'd tell about this day would be darker than anyone had anticipated. Martha stayed, helping where she could. Dutch organized the cleanup, making sure everyone got home safe. Roy and the others put away their instruments, the music forgotten. And through the window, Ethan could see Obsidian still standing in the yard, still watching the house, still waiting. "That horse saved your life," Patterson said as he worked. "Stood between you and a rifle. I've never seen anything like it. He's special, Ethan said through gritted teeth. He's loyal. There's a difference. Patterson tied off the bandage. You're going to need to rest for at least 2 weeks. No heavy lifting, no riding, no stupidity. This wound gets infected. You could still die. Understood. I'm serious. You've lost a lot of blood. Your body needs time to recover. I'll make sure he rests, Lydia said firmly. Even if I have to tie him to the bed. Patterson smiled slightly. I believe you would. He packed up his supplies. I'll check on you tomorrow. In the meantime, if you develop fever or if the bleeding starts again, send for me immediately. After he left, Lydia sat on the edge of the bed, looking exhausted and angry and relieved all at once. Cole's going to jail, she said. Maybe prison. The marshal won't take kindly to attempted murder in front of 100 witnesses. Good. His friends are probably going with him. Pete and Jack were seen loading the rifle, passing it to Cole. They'll all pay for this. Ethan closed his eyes. I don't want revenge, just want it to be over. It is over. Cole showed everyone who he really is. The valley won't forget that. An obsidian? Is standing in my front yard refusing to leave. I think you've made a friend for life. Despite the pain, despite everything, Ethan smiled. Worth it then. You keep saying that. I'm not sure I believe you. Lydia, no, let me say this. She took his hand. You could have died today. You came so close to dying, and for what? To prove a point? To show Cole and everyone else that patience beats force? Was that really worth your life? It wasn't about proving anything. It was about showing Obsidian that someone could be trusted, that not all humans would hurt him. Ethan squeezed her hand weakly, and maybe showing myself the same thing, that I could still trust, still connect, still build something good, even after everything I lost. You're still an idiot. I know. But I'm your idiot, if you'll have me. She leaned down, kissed his forehead. Sleep. We'll figure out the rest when you're not bleeding all over my sheets. He wanted to respond, but exhaustion was pulling him under. The last thing he saw before sleep claimed him was Lydia's face, and the last thing he heard was her whispered promise that she'd be there when he woke. The marshal arrived the next day with 2 deputies. Cole and his friends were arrested formally, charged with attempted murder, conspiracy, and a handful of other crimes that would likely put them away for years. Cole went quietly this time, all the fight gone out of him, replaced by the hollow realization of what he'd thrown away. The valley talked about it for weeks. The man who tried to ride the unrideable horse and succeeded. The shooting that followed. The stallion who'd stood guard over his wounded rider. It became legend, the kind of story that would be told and retold, changing slightly with each telling but always returning to the same core truth. Trust was stronger than force. Patience was stronger than pride. And sometimes the wildest things just needed someone to understand them rather than break them. Ethan healed slowly. The wound was clean but deep, and Patterson's warnings about infection proved valid. He developed a fever 3 days in that had Lydia terrified and furious in equal measure. But it broke after 2 days, and from there his recovery was steady, if frustrating. He hated being bedridden, hated being useless while Lydia ran the ranch alone. But she was adamant, and when Lydia Crow was adamant about something, arguing was pointless. Dutch visited regularly, bringing news from town and supplies Lydia needed. Martha came with books and gossip. Roy and the others brought their instruments one evening and played on the porch while Ethan listened from inside, and that was the first time he'd felt truly happy since the shooting. And every day, Obsidian stood watch. The stallion had claimed a spot in the yard near the house where he could see Ethan's window. He'd leave to eat and drink, but always returned. When Lydia tried to move him back to his corral, he'd just walk back to his chosen spot and stand there, stubborn and loyal. He thinks he's your guard dog, Lydia said, exasperated but also touched. Let him stay. Makes me feel safer. You're safe. Cole's in jail, his friends are too, and the whole valley knows what happened. Still, let him stay. So Obsidian stayed, and his presence became a fixture of Ethan's recovery. Sometimes Lydia would sit in the yard with her guitar, playing for both the man and the horse. Sometimes Dutch would bring his harmonica and join her. The music helped everyone heal, not just Ethan's body, but the valley's collective trauma from watching violence interrupt what should have been a moment of triumph. 2 weeks after the shooting, Ethan was finally allowed out of bed. He was weak, unsteady, but mobile. His first stop was the yard where Obsidian waited. The stallion nickered when he saw Ethan, walked over carefully like he understood the man was still fragile. "Hey there," Ethan said, running his hand down that powerful neck. "Thank you for protecting me, for not running, for being exactly who you are." Obsidian pressed his head against Ethan's chest, gentle despite his size. Lydia watched from the porch, and when Ethan looked up, she was crying. "What's wrong?" he called. "Nothing. Everything." She came down to join them. I'm overwhelmed by all of this, by you still being alive, by this horse who's changed everything, by the fact that I care so much it terrifies me." Ethan wrapped his good arm around her. "I know, terrifies me too. Does it get easier?" "No idea. Haven't gotten that far yet." She laughed through her tears. "Great. So we're both just making this up as we go." "Seems like it." They stood there together, the three of them, two broken people and one horse who'd learned to trust again. And for the first time in a long time, the future felt like something other than just surviving. It felt like possibility. 3 weeks after the shooting, Cole Braddock's trial happened in the county seat. Ethan had to testify, his arm still in a sling, and relive those moments when the bullet hit, when Obsidian stood guard, when everything could have ended so differently. Cole was found guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced him to 15 years in territorial prison, with his friends getting 5 years each for their roles. The verdict surprised no one, but the length of the sentences sent a message. This kind of violence wouldn't be tolerated, no matter the provocation. Cole looked at Ethan once before they took him away. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry." Ethan nodded. "I forgive you." The words seemed to surprise Cole more than the sentence had. "Why?" "Because holding on to anger would make me just like you, and I spent too long learning not to be that person to give it up now." They led Cole away, and Ethan never saw him again. On the ride back to the ranch, Lydia was quiet. "You really forgave him," she said finally. "You weren't just saying that." "I meant it." "How? He tried to kill you." "Because he was hurting. Because hurt people, and the only way to break that cycle is to choose something different." Ethan looked out at the passing landscape. "Besides, I'm alive. Obsidian's safe. We won. Holding on to anger about it won't change anything except make me bitter. You're a better person than I am." "No, just tired of carrying hate. It's too heavy." She reached over, took his hand. "I love you. I don't think I've said that yet, but I do. I love you for exactly this kind of thing. For forgiving people who shot me. For choosing to be better than you have to be. For seeing the good in broken things. For making me believe that maybe I'm not as broken as I thought." "You're not broken. You're just hurt. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Yeah, broken means can't be fixed. Hurt means still healing, and we're all still healing. That's okay." They rode the rest of the way in comfortable silence, and when they got home, Obsidian was waiting in his usual spot, and the ranch looked like exactly what it was, a place where broken things came to heal. That night, Lydia made dinner while Ethan sat at the table watching her move around her kitchen. There was an ease between them now, a comfort that came from having survived something terrible together and come out the other side. "I've been thinking," Lydia said as she served the food, "about the ranch, about what we could do with it." "What do you mean?" "Other people have horses like Obsidian, horses that have been mistreated, traumatized, written off as unrideable or dangerous. What if we took them in? What if we made this a place for horses like that, used your methods to help them heal?" Ethan considered it. "That's a big undertaking." "I know, but we could do it. Together. Make this ranch about more than just survival. Make it about healing. For the horses or for us?" "Both." She sat across from him. "I've spent 3 years just trying to get by, trying to prove I could manage alone. But I don't want to just manage anymore. I want to build something that matters. And you think I'm the right partner for that? I think you're the only partner for that. You understand broken things. You know how to help them heal without trying to fix them. That's rare." Ethan felt something settle in his chest. Purpose, maybe? Or just the simple relief of being wanted for who he was rather than what he could provide. "Okay, he said. Let's do it. Really? Really? But I have a condition. What? Marry me. Lydia froze, fork halfway to her mouth. What? Marry me. Not now, not right away. But eventually, when we're both ready, I want to build this life with you, this ranch, this purpose, and I want to do it as partners, real partners. Ethan, we've known each other for 3 months. I know. And I've learned more about who I am and who I want to be in those 3 months than I did in the year I spent running. You make me better, make me want to be better. So yeah, 3 months isn't long, but it's long enough to know what I want. She set down her fork, eyes shining. You're serious? Completely. I can't believe I'm actually considering this. Is that a yes? It's a maybe. Ask me again in 6 months. If you still feel the same way, if we've built this thing together and it works, if we survive a winter and the hardships that come with it, then ask me again. And I'll probably say yes. Probably? Definitely, but you're still an idiot for asking after 3 months. Been called worse. She came around the table, sat in his lap carefully to avoid his injured shoulder, and kissed him like she was trying to memorize the feeling. 6 months, she said when they broke apart. You can make it 6 months without running, right? I can make it a lifetime without running. Already told you, I'm staying. Then we'll see what we can build. Outside, Obsidian stood watch under the stars, and the ranch settled into the quiet of evening, and 2 people who'd spent too long alone began building something together that looked like hope. The 6 months Lydia had asked for turned into a season of transformation that none of them could have predicted. Winter came to the Arizona territory with its particular brand of hardship, freezing nights that cracked water troughs, winds that cut through even the thickest coat, and a kind of isolation that tested anyone foolish enough to think they could survive alone. But Ethan and Lydia weren't alone anymore, and that made all the difference. They worked the ranch together, building it into something more than just survival. Word spread about what Ethan had done with Obsidian, and slowly, cautiously, people started bringing their problem horses, animals that had been abused, neglected, traumatized into violence or fear, horses that everyone else had given up on. The first was a mare named Stella, brought by an older rancher named Pete Williams, who'd lost his wife the year before and couldn't bear to put down her favorite horse, even though Stella had become dangerous after watching her owner die. She tries to kick anyone who comes near her, Pete said, his voice breaking. But Margaret loved her. I can't just shoot her, not after everything. Ethan took Stella, and it took 3 weeks of patience before the mare stopped trying to kill him every time he entered her corral. But eventually, the same methods that had worked with Obsidian worked with her. Music, stillness, the simple act of being present without demanding anything. By the end of the month, Stella was calm enough to be handled. By the end of the second month, she was rideable again. Pete cried when Ethan showed him, and he wasn't ashamed of it. How much do I owe you? Pete asked. Nothing, Ethan said. Just tell people where you got help if they ask. Pete did more than tell people. He told everyone, and the flood of damaged horses that followed turned the ranch into something between a sanctuary and a legend. They came from all over, horses that had been beaten, starved, worked until they broke. Horses that had lost their riders and blamed themselves. Horses that had simply been misunderstood for so long they'd forgotten how to trust. Ethan worked with each one, learning their stories through observation rather than words, finding the key to unlock whatever trauma held them prisoner. Sometimes it was music. Sometimes it was just time. Sometimes it was introducing them to Obsidian, who had become a kind of ambassador for healing, showing the other horses that trust was possible, that not all humans meant harm. Lydia managed the business side, keeping track of the horses, coordinating with owners, making sure they could afford to feed and house the growing number of animals in their care. She was good at it, better than she'd realized. Turned out that years of surviving James's financial incompetence had taught her more about managing money than she'd given herself credit for. They hired help too, young men from town who needed work and were willing to learn Ethan's methods. Roy came out twice a week to help with the horses and bring music to the evenings. Martha started teaching reading lessons to some of the ranch hands who'd never had the opportunity to learn. Dutch supplied them on credit when money was tight, trusting they'd pay him back when they could. The ranch became a community, and the community became a family. And somewhere in all of it, Ethan and Lydia fell deeper in love than either had thought possible. It wasn't always easy. They fought sometimes, about money, about methods, about the fact that Lydia still carried walls that came down slower than Ethan's patience sometimes allowed, about the fact that Ethan pushed himself too hard, working with difficult horses until his injured shoulder screamed in protest, refusing to admit when he needed rest. "You're going to hurt yourself again," Lydia said one evening after watching him struggle with a particularly aggressive gelding. "I'm fine." "You're not fine. I can see you favoring that shoulder. It's been 6 months, Ethan. It's not going to get better if you don't let it heal." "It's healed enough." "That's not how healing works, and you know it." They'd argued about it for an hour, both stubborn, both convinced they were right, until finally Ethan had admitted that yes, the shoulder still hurt, and yes, he probably was pushing too hard. But he didn't know how to stop because stopping meant admitting limitation, and limitation felt too much like failure. Lydia had held him then, and they'd found their way back to understanding the way they always did, through honesty even when it hurt, through choosing connection over being right. The seasons turned. Winter gave way to spring, and spring to summer, and the ranch flourished in ways that had nothing to do with profit and everything to do with purpose. One evening in late summer, Ethan was working with a young stallion that had been rescued from a traveling show where he'd been beaten for entertainment. The horse, they'd named him Phoenix because he was rising from ashes, was skittish, defensive, would rear and strike if you approached too quickly. Ethan was making progress, had gotten close enough to touch Phoenix's neck, when Lydia called from the house. "Ethan, someone's here to see you!" He left Phoenix reluctantly, walked back to find a woman standing in the yard with Dutch. She was maybe 40, well-dressed, with the bearing of someone used to being taken seriously. "Mr. Hale," she said, extending her hand. "My name is Catherine Wright. I represent a consortium of ranchers in the New Mexico territory. We've heard about your work here, and we'd like to discuss a business proposition." They sat on the porch while she explained. The consortium wanted to hire Ethan to travel to their various ranches, teaching his methods to their hands, helping them rehabilitate horses they'd otherwise have to destroy. "We'd pay well," Catherine said, "cover all your travel expenses, provide accommodation, and compensate you for your time and expertise. It would be maybe 3 months of work, 4 at most, and it could establish you as the leading authority on horse rehabilitation in the territories." It was a good offer, a great offer, really, the kind of opportunity that could set them up financially for years. "I need to think about it," Ethan said. "Talk to my partner. Of course, I'll be in town for a few days. Take your time." After she left, Ethan and Lydia sat in silence. "That's a lot of money," Lydia said finally. "It is. Could really help the ranch. Let us expand, hire more help, take on more horses." "It could. But it means leaving for 3 or 4 months, means leaving you to run this place alone, means not being here for the horses we've already committed to." Lydia was quiet, and Ethan could see her working through it, the practical benefits against the personal cost, the opportunity against the sacrifice. "What do you want to do?" she asked. "I want to stay, but I also know we need the money, and this could be good for us long term." "That's not what I asked. What do you want?" He looked at her. This woman who'd taken a chance on a drifter, who'd let him into her life and her heart, who'd built something beautiful with him out of pain and determination. "I want to marry you," he said. "I want to stop waiting for the perfect moment and just do it. I want to build this life here, together, without leaving for months at a time, chasing money or reputation or anything else." "Ethan, I know you said 6 months. It's been 7 now, and I know I'm supposed to wait until the moment is right, until we've hit some milestone or achieved some goal. But I'm tired of waiting. I'm tired of letting fear or practicality or anything else stop me from claiming what I want. So I'm asking you again. Marry me. Not eventually. Not when things settle down or when we have enough money or when it makes sense. Marry me now, this week, tomorrow, if you'll have me." Lydia's eyes were wet. "You'd really turn down that money to stay here?" "In a heartbeat. The money doesn't matter if I'm not here to build this with you. If I'm off teaching other people while our ranch falls apart, what's the point? We could hire someone to manage while you're gone." "I don't want to manage. I want to be present. I want to be here for every struggle and every triumph and every morning where we wake up and choose this life together." He took her hands. "So yes, I'd turn down the money. I'd turn down anything that takes me away from this." From you." She kissed him then, hard and desperate, and when they broke apart, she was crying and laughing at the same time. "You're still an idiot," she said. "Is that a yes?" "It's a yes. It's been a yes since you asked the first time. I was just too scared to admit it." "Then let's do it. Let's get married." "When?" "This weekend. Small ceremony, just the people who matter. Dutch can officiate. He's got a license from when he used to perform weddings back before he opened the saloon. Martha can help with arrangements. We'll do it here, on the ranch, with the horses as witnesses." "That's completely insane." "I know, but it's also perfect." She wiped her eyes. "What about the New Mexico offer?" "I'll tell Catherine right no. We'll find another way to grow the ranch. We always do." But when Ethan turned down the offer the next day, Catherine surprised him. "What if we came to you instead?" she asked. "What do you mean? What if the consortium sent their problem horses here, paid for you to work with them at your ranch, and then we sent our hands here to learn from watching you? That way you don't have to leave, we still get the expertise, and everyone benefits." It was a better solution than Ethan had imagined, and after discussing it with Lydia, they agreed. The consortium would send 2 horses at a time, along with the hands responsible for them, and those hands would stay for however long it took to learn Ethan's methods and rehabilitate their horses. It meant expanding the ranch, building more corrals and bunkhouses, but it also meant staying together, building something sustainable, rather than chasing opportunities that would pull them apart. The wedding happened on a Saturday in late August, just as the heat was starting to break. They kept it simple. Lydia wore a dress Martha had helped her make. Ethan wore his best shirt and the boots he'd been saving for special occasions. Dutch officiated, stumbling through the words with the kind of emotional sincerity that had everyone crying. Roy and the musicians played, and there was dancing in the yard afterward, and food that everyone had contributed to, and the kind of joy that comes from watching 2 people who'd earned their happiness finally claim it. Obsidian stood at the edge of the gathering, watching everything with those intelligent eyes, and when Ethan and Lydia cut the cake that Mrs. Harrison had made, the Stallion nickered his approval. "Think he understands what's happening?" Lydia asked. "I think he understands we're happy. That's enough." They danced under the stars, and the valley celebrated with them. And for once, the hard land of the Arizona Territory felt gentle, welcoming, like it had decided to be kind to the people who'd chosen to stay, despite everything it threw at them. That night, after everyone had gone home, Ethan and Lydia stood in the yard looking at their ranch, at the corrals full of horses healing from their traumas, at the bunkhouses housing hands who were learning a better way, at the land that stretched out under the moon like a promise. "We did it," Lydia said softly. "We actually built something good. We're still building it. This is just the beginning." "I know, but it's a good beginning." She was right. It was. The months that followed brought challenges and triumphs in equal measure. The horses from the New Mexico consortium were some of the most damaged Ethan had worked with, and teaching the hands proved harder than working with the horses. You couldn't just be patient with people. You had to explain why patience mattered, had to convince them to unlearn everything they thought they knew about strength and control. But slowly, it worked. The hands went back to their ranches with new knowledge and new perspectives, and word continued to spread. More horses came, more people wanting to learn, more opportunities to prove that there was another way to work with animals that didn't require breaking them. The ranch grew prosperous in ways that had nothing to do with money, though the money came too, eventually, enough to be comfortable, if not wealthy. But the real wealth was in the community they'd built, the lives they'd changed, the horses they'd saved. One evening in December, nearly a year after Ethan had first arrived at the ranch, he and Lydia sat on the porch watching Obsidian play with Phoenix in the far corral. The 2 stallions had become inseparable, the older teaching the younger that trust was possible, that the past didn't have to define the future. "You ever think about Missouri?" Lydia asked. "About what you left behind?" "Sometimes. Less than I used to." "Do you regret it, leaving everything, drifting until you ended up here?" Ethan thought about it, about Sarah, about the ranch he'd lost, about the year of wandering and pain and searching for something he couldn't name. "No," he said finally. "I regret that Sarah died. I regret that I couldn't save her, couldn't save the ranch, couldn't hold on to what we'd built. But I don't regret leaving. Because leaving brought me here. Brought me to you, to this place, to this life. And I wouldn't trade this for anything." Even if you could go back? Change things so Sarah lived? That's not fair. I know, but I need to know. Need to understand if I'm just what you settled for because you couldn't have what you really wanted. He turned to face her fully. You're not what I settled for. You're what I chose. Sarah was my past, and I loved her, and I'll always carry that. But you're my present and my future. You're the person I choose to build with, to struggle with, to grow old with. And that's not settling. That's choosing life over grief, hope over regret, tomorrow over yesterday. She leaned against him, and he wrapped his arm around her, and they sat in comfortable silence while the stars came out and the horses settled for the night. I'm pregnant, Lydia said quietly. Ethan froze. What? Found out this morning. Didn't know how to tell you. Wasn't sure if you'd want... He kissed her, cutting off her words, pouring every ounce of joy and fear and love into it. How far along? Maybe 6 weeks. Not far. And it might not... I'm not young, and things can go wrong. They can, or they can go right. We'll figure it out together, whatever happens. You're happy about this? I'm terrified, but yes, I'm happy. I'm so damn happy I don't have words for it. She laughed, relieved. Good, because I'm terrified too. They told the ranch hands the next day, and the celebration that followed was loud and joyful and exactly what they needed. Dutch brought champagne he'd been saving for a special occasion. Martha started planning a nursery. Roy wrote a terrible song about babies and horses that made everyone laugh. The valley rallied around them the way communities do when they decide you're worth protecting. And Ethan and Lydia accepted the help with gratitude, knowing that isolation had nearly destroyed them both, and community had saved them. The pregnancy was difficult. Lydia was sick for months, and there were scares that sent them rushing to the doctor in the middle of the night. But she was stubborn, and the baby was stubborn, and together they made it through. In late summer, during the hottest part of the year, Lydia gave birth to a daughter. They named her Sarah Margaret. Sarah for Ethan's first wife, Margaret for Lydia's mother who died when she was young. A name that honored the past while looking toward the future. The baby was tiny, wrinkled, beautiful in the way newborns are when you love them fiercely enough to overlook the objective reality that they all look like angry potatoes. She had Lydia's dark hair and Ethan's gray eyes, and a set of lungs that suggested she'd inherited both their stubborn streaks. Ethan held his daughter for the first time and felt something in his chest crack open, not breaking, but expanding, making room for a love so big it was almost painful. "Hello, little one," he whispered. "Welcome to the world. It's hard and beautiful and terrifying, and you're going to be amazing in it." Lydia watched from the bed, exhausted and radiant. "We made a person." "We did. That's insane. Completely. I love you. I love you too." Sarah Margaret grew quickly, the way babies do, transforming from a potato to a person with alarming speed. By the time she was 6 months old, she was crawling. By 9 months, walking. By a year, causing the kind of chaos that only toddlers can create. She loved the horses, showed no fear of them even when she was small enough that they could have accidentally hurt her. Obsidian was particularly gentle with her, would lower his head so she could pat his nose, would stand perfectly still while she toddled around his legs. "He knows," Lydia said, watching them together. "He knows she's special." All the horses know. Animals are better at understanding what matters than people are. The ranch continued to grow. They took on more horses, hired more hands, built a reputation that spread far beyond the territories. People came from as far as California and Texas bringing horses they'd been told to destroy, and more often than not, Ethan found a way to help them heal. Not every horse could be saved. Some were too damaged, too deep in their trauma to find their way back. Those were the hardest days, when Ethan had to admit defeat, had to tell an owner that their horse would never be rideable, never be safe, never be anything but a danger to themselves and others. But those days were rare, and the successes far outnumbered the failures. 5 years after Ethan had first arrived at the ranch, Dutch asked him a question that had been bothering the old saloon keeper for a while. "What's the secret?" Dutch asked. "How do you do it? How do you take these broken horses and make them whole again?" They were sitting on the porch, watching Sarah Margaret, now 5 years old, playing in the yard with a litter of puppies Roy's dog had produced. Lydia was inside making dinner, and the sounds and smells of home drifted through the open windows. There's no secret, Ethan said. Just patience, time, the willingness to see the animal for what it is rather than what you want it to be. That's it? That's it. Most people want to force healing, want to push through trauma like it's an obstacle to overcome. But trauma doesn't work that way. It's not something you beat or conquer. It's something you carry, something you learn to live with, something that becomes part of you but doesn't define you. That sounds like you're talking about people, not horses. Same principle applies. Ethan watched his daughter laugh as the puppies tumbled over her. Everyone's carrying something. Everyone's hurt in ways that don't show. And the world keeps telling us to be strong, to get over it, to not let it slow us down. But real strength isn't pretending you're not hurt. It's acknowledging the hurt and choosing to keep going anyway. Choosing to trust again, to love again, to build again, even when you know it might fall apart. Dutch was quiet for a moment. Cole ever write you? Once. About 3 years ago. Said he was sorry, that he'd had a lot of time to think about what he'd done. I wrote back, told him I forgave him. Never heard from him again. You really forgive him? I do. Holding on to anger would just poison me. He's living with the consequences of his choices. I don't need to punish him any more than he's already punishing himself. You're a better man than most. I'm just a man who's been broken enough to recognize it in others, and who's been loved enough to know it's possible to heal. Sarah Margaret ran over, breathless and happy. Papa, can we ride Obsidian tomorrow? If your mama says it's okay. She will if you ask her. Ethan laughed. You're learning to manipulate already. That's dangerous. Mama says it's called negotiation. Your mama would say that. Lydia came out, wiping her hands on her apron. Dinner's ready. Sarah, go wash up. But Mama... No buts. Wash up. Sarah sighed dramatically but obeyed, running toward the pump with the kind of energy only children possess. She's got you wrapped around her finger, Lydia said to Ethan. She comes by it honestly. Her mother has the same talent. Flatterer. Truth teller. They went inside for dinner and the conversation flowed easily. Talk of the ranch, the horses, the hands, the small dramas and triumphs that made up their daily life. After Sarah was asleep and the dishes were done, Ethan and Lydia sat on the porch like they did most evenings, watching the stars and listening to the sounds of the horses settling for the night. You ever think about what would have happened if you'd kept drifting? Lydia asked. If you'd never stopped here? Sometimes. Usually when I want to torture myself. Would you have been okay? Eventually, maybe. Found some other place, some other way to survive. But I wouldn't have this. Wouldn't have you, wouldn't have Sarah, wouldn't have built something that matters. I'd have just been existing instead of living. What's the difference? Existing is going through the motions, surviving day to day without purpose or connection. Living is choosing to be present, to build, to love even when it's hard, to risk being hurt because the alternative is being alone. She leaned against him. I'm glad you stopped drifting. Me too. They sat in comfortable silence, and Ethan thought about the journey that had brought him here. The loss, the pain, the year of wandering, the morning he'd ridden into this valley with nothing but a tired horse and a wounded heart, the way Lydia had looked at him that first day, assessing whether he was worth the risk. He thought about Obsidian, about the trust they'd built, about the moment the Stallion had stood between him and a bullet. He thought about Cole, about forgiveness, about the choice to let go of anger. He thought about all the horses they'd saved, all the people they'd taught, all the lives they'd touched. And he thought about Sarah Margaret, sleeping inside, a whole person who existed because he'd chosen to stop running, chosen to trust, chosen to believe that happiness was possible even after everything had fallen apart. The world was still hard. The land was still unforgiving. People still hurt each other. Horses still carried trauma. Life still dealt out pain with abandon. But there was also this: quiet evenings with the person you loved, a daughter sleeping safely inside, horses healing in the corrals, a community that cared for each other, a purpose that went beyond mere survival. There was beauty in the brokenness, strength in the vulnerability, hope in the willingness to try again after failing. And maybe that was the real secret. Not that broken things could be fixed, but that broken things could still be beautiful, could still have value and purpose and the capacity for joy, could still choose connection over isolation, trust over fear, tomorrow over yesterday. Ethan had learned that from Obsidian, Or maybe Obsidian had learned it from him. Either way, they taught each other that the wildest, most damaged things sometimes just needed someone to sit with them without judgment, to offer patience without expectation, to prove through presence that trust was worth the risk. "What are you thinking about?" Lydia asked. "Everything. Nothing. How lucky I am." "Luck had nothing to do with it. You chose this. We both did." "Then I'm glad we made that choice." "Me too." In the corral, Obsidian stood silhouetted against the moon, powerful and free. No longer wild, but not tame either. Just himself. Fully and completely, in a place where that was enough. And on the porch, two people who'd survived their own breaking sat together building a life that proved you could start over, could heal, could find happiness in the aftermath of loss if you were brave enough to try. The land was still hard, but they were harder. The world was still cruel, but they were kinder. And in that harsh frontier where only the strongest were meant to survive, they hadn't just survived. They'd learned that real strength wasn't about control or dominance or never showing weakness. Real strength was choosing to trust when you'd been betrayed, choosing to love when you'd been hurt, choosing to build when everything had fallen apart. Real strength was being vulnerable enough to connect, patient enough to heal, and brave enough to believe that tomorrow could be better than yesterday. And in the end, that was the only kind of strength that mattered.